After the supplies were unloaded, the team got out of their void suits and into casual clothes. David settled on simple jeans and a black undershirt, along with his jacket. Soon they were all aboard the Saul Terminus station, and Oscar led the way to a bar he knew. Everyone was a bit dubious about this, but he said, "Oh, it's great! Good music and drinks and a dance floor, too," which won him enough support. The bar, however, turned out to be a club, and David could feel the faint vibrations of synthwave music from out the door. He read the sign, Neon Dragon, an appropriate name. The inside was large and clearly divided by a sound-suppressing shield array, allowing for easy and clear conversation by the bar and setting area, while the dance floor was filled with music to fully embrace the songs. David could help but smile. This will be a good time indeed. The team had decided to start the night off with a round of shots, paid for by Jackson, and all agreed to get back onto the ship in 2.5 hours, Earth time. Soon David found himself thinking and sipping on an old-fashioned when someone sat next to him. "So you come here often?" said the voice, rich and soothing like honey. "Just a stopover," David said, looking up into the mirror to see who would interact with him. "What about you?" The woman who had sat next to him was a triaxane, dressed in very comfortable yet form-fitting clothes that hugged her body. Her people's human-like appearance made more than a few people turn their heads. Her skin looked smooth, and a brilliant shade of blue with the pattern that ran along it reminded David of tribal tattoos that some people still get. Her eyes always unsettled David, that glowing that they have made it impossible to fully tell what they are looking at. "Well," leaned into David a bit more, "I am just passing through as well." She slowed her advance, "And I was hopeful that I may get to dance with a strong human beforehand." David would be lying if he claimed he wasn't interested. But he had already burned an hour away, and would most likely not make it to the ship if he stayed. "I am sorry, miss," David said, turning to face her completely, "but my ship leaves in an hour, and I honestly don't have the time." He reached for her hand and gave it a gentle kiss. "To make your night as enchanting and alluring as yourself." She seemed stunned, and held his eyes before saying, "Well, how about a contact, so that we may make time at a later date or place?" She slipped a flirtatious smile. David had little reason to say no, and calmly said, "David Solomon, Human Liaison Officer of the GEV 105, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance." "Genravive Lucindar," she said. "So you're part of that 4-month expedition to the unknown regions. Where will be your point of return?" Adding a hint of interest. "Sardius Terminus, in the Xandri solar system," he told her. "Well, I am sure I can get my ship there, although I'll have to find a way to make the trip." She paused. "Profitable," she said with a wink to David before leaving him and walking over to a Xandraphane. As he turned back to his drink, he felt a pair of arms land on his shoulder, followed by the alcohol-ridden voice. "Captain, Samantha's picking on me again." Angela drove her head into David's back. "Not a captain anymore, Angela," David reminded her, though he doubted she heard him. "Also learn to fight your own battles." From the table a bit away from the bar, he heard Samantha yell, "Oh, come on, Angie, he wouldn't bite." There was a pause and a low yelp. "Much!" That spiked David's interest enough to turn and look over his shoulder and saw a Xandraphane male sitting next to Samantha, most likely whispering sweet nothings into her ear. Next to them sat a Lithrani male on the bar side of the table sipping his drink, his ears folded down backward, dressed in an undershirt and his crew uniform shorts. "Well, Angie." David started getting Angela's attention. "Your friend is a part of the crew, so you could just talk to him and get to know him," he said like he was talking to a toddler. Angela took a second to register his word before turning to the Lithrani and back to David. "He is a medical assistant and he is boring." She looked over to him again. "All he wants to talk about is medical stuff we do." David figured that's the issue. Angela is a fantastic medic and studies things she may never use, but get enough drinks in her and it's like someone flicked a switch, and David knew just how to give her what she wanted. "Okay, ask him about his family," he said. "Why that?" Angela remarked. "Lithrani psychology is a bit weird, just trust me," David replied with confidence. Angela just shrugged and walked back to her table, and David finally got back to drinking in peace. At least he hoped. He soon heard Angela's giggles and Samantha laughing, which as far as he was concerned, good. Soon, one by one, each member of his team went back to the ship. Some with fellow crew members in their arms, others carrying a teammate who decided they needed one more drink. Until he was one of the only team members left. He still had half an hour to kill, and so signaled the bartender. 2 old-fashioned, 1 Xandraphane safe, please, said a voice next to him. Her tone was calming and refined. So, Alaris, David said as he turned his head a bit, is this drink on you? He smiled a bit. Well, she began as she removed the light leather jacket he wore and sat down, considering 5 of my male pack mates decided that they would spend the night with females of your pack. She turned a bit to face him. You are buying. David watched her for a second. The top she wore was loose but comfortable and gave a bit of a clear picture of her cleavage when she leaned. And her fur was brushed back and braided. Her pants were tight, but allowed for all the flexibility she needed, however, cut just below her core, exposing most of it and showing the slenderness of her midsection. Her body, now that David could see it without the uniform, was very much an hourglass, and if David had to give her a description, devastatingly stunning. Well, I guess that's fair. Odds are my team members don't know what they are doing, and your packmates will think of this as more than it is, David said, trying to keep his focus away from her. You know, if you want, I can drag them out into the hallway after we get on board again. Alaris laughed a bit. That would make rounding them up a lot easier. She thanked the bartender as their drinks arrived and David paid. You know, I was surprised to see you here. Oh? David said before taking a sip. Yes, when we spoke earlier, you gave me the impression that you aren't the type to go drinking and partying. She said coldly before taking her sip. But you just walked in with your pack and all. How did you do that? Keep such distance and respectfulness? Well, my mother always said a conversation is about respect. She always told me to be kind to others. David said a grimace took him. Well, she did. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to distress you, Alaris said, careful of her words. How long has it been? David thought back for a second. 7 Earth years. She was on a cruise ship, the Aurora Starlight. David wiped away a tear and sighed. Sorry, about your question, Distance? Well, I guess that was my time in the armed forces, he said, trying to switch subjects. Alaris saw through his efforts and chose to follow his lead. Oh, so you are more than just a pretty face, she said with a wolfish smile that oddly soothed David. And how long did you do that? About 10 Earth years, 212th Orbital Assault Troopers, Hell's finest, David replied with a note of pride in his voice. Wait, Alaris said, counting out the difference in time scaling. Were you deployed to Hygnaran? She finally asked. Yeah, why? You are the idiots that missed your drop point and landed in our supply base. She laughed out loud. David's face turned a shade of red. It was the only mistake his regiment ever made in the 100 years since humanity joined the Council. Unfortunately for him, he was there and so couldn't scapegoat this issue. Ha ha ha, he yelled a bit. It was a mistake in the heat of battle also. Your planetary defense batteries didn't even scratch the Jack Kalo fleet. Alaris finally calmed herself down and looked to David. So, 11 alignments. When did you join? Right out of high school, he said, taking in a deep breath. I was a good student, but my mother couldn't afford higher learning, so I joined with the plan of making them teach me. Oh, your military does that. What did you learn? She asked, interested. Xenodiplomacy. I want to be the next ambassador to the Council, he said with confidence. But they also made me learn xeno-military history. A sour note resonated. Oh, wow, that's an ambiguous goal. Alaris failed to suppress her interest, however. Both of their communicators let off a short burst of beeps. Well, looks like we should get back to the ship, she said while getting up and grabbing her jacket. On board a personal shop of Genraviv Lucindar. A communication terminal came to life as Genraviv came into the cockpit, leaned over and tuned the communications array for her home system and waited. A few seconds later, the terminal showed a stocky Triaxian male dressed in a uniform. Agent GA-117, report, he barked. The human contingent on board the GEV-105 do have a second objective. I tried to pull the information from David Solomon. He is their leader. She paused. It has something to do with an Operation Nebula, however. That is all I could glean from his surface thoughts. Good work. Proceed to Earth. Focus on someone in the EDS. They will be a good starting point, the man said before cutting communication. Human Liaison Officer, go to cabin C-12-6, Gavi said. Human Liaison Officer, go to cabin C-12-6. David had just sobered up enough before sleeping to avoid a headache. But that didn't help with the gut feeling of vomit rising. Yep, give me a second, he said, his voice harsh from the dryness of his throat. Choosing to forego his full uniform, he just grabbed his jacket and threw it over the undershirt he wore last night. He slips his boots on and lets his pajama pants gather up at the cuff before heading to the door. C-12-6 was an apartment-style cabin and houses 5 crew members of medium-sized, although David couldn't remember for the life of him who had that suite. But as he rounded the final corner, he saw a Xandraphane male sitting by the room, quietly waiting for someone. David wasn't sure exactly how they were. He knew that they were at least past their Kilahinner because of the armband that sat just above his elbow. David didn't pay the young man any mind and walked to the door and requested entry. Somewhere in his hazy mind, he felt like he had seen the Xandraphane before but couldn't place his face right now. After a few seconds of waiting, the distorted voice, Samantha, "Is Zaf still there?" she asked in English. David gave the man a quick look as their ears twitched. "Yes, he is, but he is sitting here and waiting." "Fine, come in, but only you," Samantha said as the door opened. David quickly entered and closed the door behind him. Looking around the room, it looks fine, but all the women teammates were sitting in the living room area. All of them were at least dressed, but Maya looked like she was on the edge of crying. David took a deep breath and let it out slowly to focus his mind. "So who wants to fill me in on what happened?" Samantha looked at the door and then back to David. "Well, we all started getting up in the morning and he was still here saying that he and Maya were married." She glanced at her room and followed up with, "I mean, most of the guys we brought home are still here, but they are all asleep." Samantha Traynor was David's second in the armed forces and is now the captain of the team's security element. Her athletic build gives her more than she needs for fighting, but she will always tell you it is for her ass to look better than yours. Her more tomboyish demeanor is due to her childhood. While David would jokingly call her an Amazon to her face, he genuinely means it. Between her light brown skin and flowing black hair, she looks like someone that you don't want to piss off on a good day. However, her pale blue eyes always carry a hint of care for anyone she meets. Did he say married? David was confused as the Xandraphane people have a few words that meant different things, but no actual word for marriage. Maya spoke up. "He said that I am his Mishra when I asked him to explain." She took a deep breath. "He said that we were bonded together and he will follow me where I go." She started crying. Maya Makinen is a beauty herself. Her pale skin, blonde hair, and pale blue eyes are all gifts of her Finnish ancestry. However, like some of her ancestors, she has a great love of exploration and discovery. "Oh, that is bad, but not unmanageable," David said. Before raising his comm device, "Gavi, can you please connect me to Alaris?" He saw out the corner of his eye as everyone except Maya gazed at David with curiosity. There was a second of silence before a connection was made. "David, do you need something? I am a bit busy." Alaris's voice spoke out at him. "I have a guy here by C-12-6 named Zaf. He thinks that he and one of my teammates are Mishrani, but their night together was more of a Kinhinra. I think he'll need your help getting him to leave her alone." He said back. He had an idea why she was busy, but didn't want to guess. "So that's where he is at. Would I be correct to assume that you have the other 4 there too?" she asked back. David looked over and everyone nodded as they heard the question. "Yes, but most are asleep. Do you want me to wake them up? My offer from last night still stands," he said with a bit of glee in his voice. "No, I am already on my way. Please let me and mine handle the removal of the stupid pups," she said with a determined voice, before the connection was terminated. David turned back to the girls and calmly said with a smile, "Sorry about that. Alaris is the liaison officer of the Xandraphane pack on board. As for that one," David gestured to the door, "he is young and stupid, a bit like Cole." Which causes everyone to burst into a bout of laughter. Even Maya joins. As they settled down, David looked over to Maya. So, a Mishra is a bonded pair. It is usually the first step to becoming an honored patriarch. He explained that Zaf was ambitious. He would need your mother's, yours, and your pack sister's permission. He gestured at the rest of the company in the room. Wait, we all told him they can't be, Anastasia said in a gap in David's explanation, her thick Russian accent bleeding into her English. Yes, the mother is the ultimate authority. Next time, if any Zondrafin said something like that, say that one of your friends is a Noayon Shas. It translates to mother's shadow. They would act the role of your mother next time this happened, he said, locking eyes with each of them for a second. Just outside the door, harsh words were exchanged before a request for entry came. Looking at the girls, David answered and allowed Alaris's group in. And she did indeed bring some of her pack as 6 females dressed similarly to Alaris came in and stood in line, one of which held Zaf by his sleeve. Alaris stepped forward a bit and looked at David before turning her attention to Maya. His face softly shifted. As Noeo of the pack on this ship, I wish to apologize for the actions of the Marquez of my pack. If you could show us where they are, we will get them out of here, she said calmly. All of the humans looked to David, who just gave a nod, and they each walked to her doors and opened them. Almost as soon as the doors opened, 4 figures tried to rush the door to escape, but were quickly caught by Alaris and her band. As soon as each had a firm grasp on the attempted runaways, Alaris turned to David and his teammates. Sorry about that. I figured they heard me earlier and figured they would try to run. She turned her head and gave one of her pack a nod. Also, this one needs to say something as the one holding Zaf released her grip. Zaf fell to the ground and bowed his head towards Maya. I am sorry for I misunderstood what we were, and in my ignorance I pushed for something you didn't want. David turned to Maya and said to her in English, He wouldn't move unless you forgive him. He gestured to Zaf and continued, You can also demand he is punished for such an action. He kept a stern face. It is your call. Maya was the team biochemist and one of the nicest on the whole team. But she has made it clear to most of the men on their team that she didn't want a partner. She drew a deep breath and spoke in common, a gentle smile. I forgive you, as this was a misunderstanding between our cultures, however. Her eyes turned hard as she continued. You will tell any Zandrafane guy you meet that they should work with our culture in mind. David couldn't help but chuckle quietly at the face Zaf made. Okay, so that's that, he said, a turn to Alaris. Thank you for your assistance. Alarid gave him a nod and spoke in Xandris at her pack before they all left, followed by David.